Hi, folks. Welcome back. Today I'm responding to Nate, who I believe is the editor or live editor of the H3 podcast. See, at the end of my appearance on H3, my debate with Ethan Klein, things got lighter. We stepped outside the formal debate structure, started talking more informally, and a couple of jokes were made. When Nate said he wouldn't vote for me, I made a joke that I would deport him. It was clearly a joke. In the moment I said it was a joke, it was said in a casual moment at the end of a 3.5-hour conversation. Nate later live streamed for about an hour discussing how that joke affected him. And I want to start by addressing how he framed it from the beginning. Before even showing the clip, Nate primed his audience by calling it a spicy one, very eye-opening, and saying that if anyone were on the fence, this would push them one way already. That's classic audience framing. He told viewers how to interpret the moment before they even got a chance to see it. Now, that's obviously not analysis, that's narrative framing. He framed the clip as shocking and disqualifying before allowing anyone to judge for themselves. That's emotional preconditioning, not an actual argument, and if the goal were truly to evaluate my fitness for office, the standard should be legislative judgment, enforcement philosophy, district accountability, and institutional reform, not tone framing. That said, what he never addressed were my structural policy positions. See, in the actual 3.5-hour debate, I discussed interior removals versus chaotic street enforcement by ICE. I talked about the breakdown in jail coordination under sanctuary policies. I discussed federal local enforcement conflicts and rules of engagement accountability for ICE agents. None of that was engaged. Instead, he chose emotional framing to replace structural evaluation. Needless to say, this wasn't an honest political discussion from the bat. It was emotional appeal dressed up as civic outrage. He then escalates that 3-second joke into what he presents as a political crisis. See, out of context, he turns that moment into a district voting mobilization call. He encourages people to move into the district before the election to register and vote against me, which is, at the very least, ethically questionable. He endorses my opponent while openly admitting he doesn't know anything about her policies. He tells viewers to email Laura Friedman. He makes broad character judgments about me and portrays me as unfit, as racist, as hypocritical, as desperate, all from a 3-second joke at the end of a 3.5-hour podcast. Needless to say, that's scope inflation. He takes a small moment and inflates it into supposed proof of disqualification. See, if someone wants to argue I'm unfit for office, then debate my governing model. Debate my transparency commitments. Debate my district-first voting philosophy. Debate whether publishing vote explanations within 24 hours improves accountability. Debate whether monthly live constituent calls and public meeting logs are good governance. Debate my proposals to reform or repeal sanctuary coordination policies. All things I've suggested. But guess what? Nate doesn't. He avoids all of it. Instead of engaging institutional competence, he escalates tone into moral disqualification. And needless to say, that's not a rebuttal. That's just clear deflection. Now, all that said, I do think it's important to highlight how there's a clear selective sensitivity standard at play. See, Nate says, I don't like politicians joking like that. He says, we're not cool like that. He says, you don't joke like that with non-Latinos. He says, it hits differently. But he immediately says it wasn't threatening. He says he was fine. He says it didn't affect his day. So which is it, Nate? Is this structurally racist and disqualifying, or was it resolved emotionally within seconds? That's clear moral inflation followed by emotional deflation. If the claim is that tone reflects policy cruelty, then debate my actual policies. My stated position on the podcast was against reckless street violence during border enforcement operations. It was enforcement of federal law with structural reform, improved jail cooperation between county, state, and federal governments, clearer statutory guidance, accountability for rules of engagement violations, and movement away from chaotic public-facing tactics that lead to unnecessary confrontation. All things he infused to engage at all, which is understandable why he quickly pivoted into identity essentialism. He brings up my Brazilian background, my Italian heritage. Yes, my mother is Italian, and I have Brazilian, Italian, and American citizenships. And he constructs a narrative that I'm ashamed of being Latino, that I hate my background, that I'm hiding my identity somehow, and that I'm trying to appeal to conservatives as one of the good ones, which is just pure mind reading. It's motive projection and a clear genetic fallacy. He claims that mentioning my Italian background somehow proves shame about my Brazilian heritage, which is completely unfounded. It's psychological speculation masquerading as analysis. Instead of engaging with what I said, again, he chooses to psychoanalyze me. Meanwhile, my political model is district first representation. I've said repeatedly, I'm not an ideologue, I'm principled. My morality is founded in Christ, but I represent District 30. That means structured engagement, awareness that the district is largely blue, and willingness to legislate in accordance with constituent interests instead of inflicting my will on them. That governance discussion was instead replaced with pure identity theater. Which brings us to perhaps one of the weakest things that Nate did. He attempted to construct a hypocrisy argument around birthright citizenship. He speculates that my parents intentionally used birthright citizenship. He admits he doesn't know. He admits it's clear assumption. He admits he doesn't oppose birthright citizenship. He even says he himself benefited from it. That's argument collapse through concession. You can't accuse someone of hypocrisy, then concede you don't know any of the things you're citing and that you've done the same thing. Birthright citizenship is constitutional structure. My policy discussion concerns statutory enforcement, executive discretion, legislative reform thresholds, and abuse mechanisms such as foreign birth tourism programs, including well-documented patterns involving Chinese citizens coming to America to use our chain migration system. If Nate wants to debate immigration reform, debate statutory clarity, debate resource allocation, debate interior removals versus random sweeps, and also debate constitutional feasibility. Don't build retroactive moral purity tests based purely on speculation. Now, when talking about the joke, Nate conflates his personal experience with structural judgment, right? He brings up workplace racism that he supposedly experienced. He references an actor who's playing a Border Patrol character making a joke towards him. He talks about emotional context and choosing battles. Now, assuming that those are all real experiences, those are not direct rebuttals to my policy positions. He shifts from, was the joke appropriate, to this reflects structural racism and lived experience. Couldn't be any more of a leftist, right? That's clear emotional amplification. See, legislation must be evaluated by measurable outcomes. Cost analysis, enforcement efficiency, and constitutional boundaries. And while personal narratives matter, governance requires structural clarity. Things like budget oversight, enforcement guidelines, accountability mechanisms, and district impact metrics, none of which was engaged. In essence, Nate is choosing to talk around my policy positions so he can build this dishonest framing around who I am and why I'm disqualified, all purely based on emotion and not grounded in fact at all. Now, it's actually surprising that he makes a very telling admission because he talks about his refusal of reconciliation. See, at the end of the podcast, I offered him a handshake as I walked out. He moved his cup and said, "Nah, I'm good," and later celebrated it. And he discusses this on his live stream while claiming that he chooses love and doesn't understand hate. That's clear, inconsistent signaling. See, Ethan and I disagreed sharply, but we shook hands several times throughout the debate. In my debate with Isaiah Martin on Jubilee, we disagreed strongly, and we still shook hands. And that civility matters, folks. I extended my hand because I don't want this country to fall apart. Even when people disagree or take offense at jokes, we should still be able to come together. Division escalates temperature. Temperature escalates conflict. And in my leadership model, I want to engage everybody. I want to represent everybody. That's why I believe that we can have disagreements and still be able to work together. And further, my leadership model is engagement under scrutiny, as I did on the H3 podcast. I will show up to hostile environments. I will host live district Q&As. I will publish transparent vote explanations, something none of my opponents have ever committed to doing. And I believe civic temperature matters more than theater. I'm not curating an image like Laura Friedman. I'm not hiding behind polished ads, behind wealthy donors, behind AIPAC. I go into hostile rooms. I talk to people who disagree with me, and that's all authenticity. Now, all that being said, it's unsurprising that he then chooses to go after the ad hominems, right? They always go after the ad hominems. He goes straight to career delegitimization. He talks about AI content. He talks about comedy, desperation, grift. He says, I have no shot at winning. And that's all pure ad hominem. None of that addresses my platform, my policies, my district plan, or my structural proposals. See, viability is measured by ballot access, by signature thresholds, by district outreach, by door-knocking frequency, by campus forums, by faith community engagement, and structured legislative proposals, all things I've been actively doing. So needless to say, my past content formats are absolutely irrelevant to the policy framework that I've presented and I'm actually running on. And look, bottom line, if you look at the structure of his stream, it's clear. It's all emotional framing, clip farming, identity speculation, hypocrisy accusation, moral injury narrative that he just keeps imploding. He relies on career delegitimization so he can improve his community bonding. And he closes all of it with a hypocritical choose love. That's clear community consolidation rhetoric. It's commentary identity reinforcement. It's not an actual structural debate. Debate requires isolating claims. What is my enforcement framework? What is my transparency model? What is my district engagement structure? What is my anti-corruption mechanism? None of that gets tested because it's not in his interest to actually debate policy. He wants to smear me so he can build a greater bond with his audience. So to recap, Nate never actually addresses my ICE nuance. He never engages with my criticism of chaotic street enforcement. He never brings up my position on interior removals, my district first representation model, my transparency commitments, or my oversight framework. Instead, he chooses to focus on tone, on jokes, on a 3-second joke in a 3.5-hour podcast, on identity narratives, on speculative hypocrisy that collapses into itself, and ad hominems. Needless to say, that is all strategic avoidance. Meanwhile, I'm focused on governance, folks. I've been laying out policy ideas. I have 3 core proposals already posted on my homepage on my website, and I'm building out a broader platform that I will be releasing soon. If you want to read those initial proposals, visit DennisForChange.com. I'm focused on improving the lives of people in District 30. I'm focused on structural reform, transparency, and accountability. Unfortunately, these sorts of distraction tactics are common among people who would rather inflame than actually debate. But I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing for the people of this district, showing up, engaging policy, and building a governance model centered on results. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.